Hi guys! The eagle-eyed among you might have noticed that for their first album, Definitely Maybe, Oasis released a track-by-track documentary on this, the DVD, and also on their YouTube page. For their second album, What's the Story Morning Glory, they produced a quite long track-by-track deep dive documentary. But for the third album, for Be Here Now, Noel Gallagher started a track-by-track documentary and seemingly gave up after track 1. In an interview with The Sun in 2006, then Oasis bass player Andy Bell said that Noel had purged Be Here Now from his mind, hence none of its tracks being included in the Stop the Clocks album. However, in 1997, before the purge began, Noel gave an interview to Phil Sutcliffe of Q magazine, going through, in a little bit of detail, each track from the Be Here Now album and saying a few sentences about each one. So today, I'm going to share some of the thoughts of the pre-purge 1997 Noel on each track of Be Here Now, and I am extremely proud to be joined via Zoom interview by the one and only Mr. Nick Brine. This is the man who recorded both What's the Story Morning Glory and Be Here Now with the band. He was featured very heavily in the Return to Rockfield documentary. He's a personal friend of the band, and he was there for the entirety of the recording of Be Here Now. Very quickly before we start, I just wanted to let you guys know that you can now pre-order my second EP, the Flying Through the Noise EP, named by you guys, from the link in the description below. And a massive thank you in advance to anyone who joins this campaign to get British rock and roll back where it belongs, in the UK charts. So without further ado, please join me to hear some incredible behind the scenes stories with the one and only Mr. Nick Brine! So Nick Brine, hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. It is such a privilege to talk to the man who recorded Morning Glory and Be Here Now. Welcome.
Thank you, nice to meet you. How you doing?
Very well, thanks, mate. You've got a serious guitar collection behind you there. I thought I was bad for guitars. That's a serious...
That's just a start. The rest are over there. They all belong to my assistant, not mine.
I believe you.
That's what I tell her.
Just researching before I spoke to you, I could almost say what everyone had for breakfast on every day of the recording of Morning Glory, but when it comes to Be Here Now, there's so little information, and a lot of Oasis fans like myself rate that album only fractionally below the first two. Still a classic, still a monumental 90s thing. So
I love the record. I think it's a great record. The sessions were a lot more closed. There was a lot more security around the sessions, and a lot more privacy around them. So it's maybe why a lot of the stuff like you're saying about, and there's not that much information out there. It's because it was a very tight-knit kind of group of people. And I had great time, great times with Liam and all the people that he would bring back. And like, obviously for Noel and Owen, a lot more stressful, a lot more kind of work involved.
Yeah, you get the impression that it was just, like, from the media point of view, chaos at the time. People kind of trying to climb in through the bathroom window and just everything,
Yeah, it was insane. I mean, a lot of people, I don't think, realise what level that got to at that point. It was insane. And it was difficult. I mean, we had to move studios every couple of weeks just because of all the press intrusion. And it was just part and parcel, though. We just had to accept that that was what was going on at the time.
In Q magazine, Noel said this about Do You Know What I Mean? The Morse code in the background was inspired by Strawberry Fields. We got hold of a code book and tried to tap out bugger all to follow that line, don't look back because you know what you might see. But if anyone can tell me what we really said, please let me know. The truth is, the Morse code for Do You Know What I Mean doesn't actually say anything. It's the Morse code equivalent of just mashing the keys on a keyboard. It's just nonsense. On Do You Know What I Mean? I'm curious about things like the 30 guitar overdubs. Legendarily, you and Owen used two tape machines, which is that 96 tracks, is that?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You knew a song was finished when you'd used up all 96 tracks. That was when it was finished.
Yeah, well, that was my next question. Again, in one of your interviews, you said, I was really inspired by Owen Morris's creativity and his determination to use up all 96 tracks. Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing with Owen is he wasn't massive on like multi-miking. So it wasn't that the tracks were being used up by multiple miking, the tracks were being used up by actual parts, by overdub, so layering. And his and Noel's idea for the production of that record was to layer up as much as possible.
Was that principle of using all 96 tracks, did that apply to all 12 songs as well?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, it just became a running joke. Really, he'd ask me how many tracks we got left, and then I'd say, we're nowhere near that. We got 20 left, and he'd be like, right, okay. Noel would be there doing his guitars and say, how many tracks we got left? It would always be that. All right, we'll keep going. Then I got another idea.
In the Q magazine interview, Noel revealed that at least part of the song, My Big Mouth, is actually about John Lennon, specifically the second verse, God, being Noel's cryptic reference to John Lennon, and presumably to his death as well, with the line about the assassin. Noel said this, I ain't never spoke to God, I ain't never been to heaven. That's about fans who think you're on the phone to John Lennon, and you have all the answers. I understand where it comes from, people meeting their heroes, they talk to you without thinking, because they only have a minute. So interestingly, part of the lyrics, presumably from that same second verse, are actually about Oasis fans at the time. On My Big Mouth, that's one of two Be Here Now songs that they performed at Nebworth, the other being It's Getting Better Man.
Yeah, I mean, it was good that they chose to play those because they, like you say, they had that kind of early Oasis sound. Whereas What's the Story, there was pretty much only the band, me and Owen there the whole time. Whereas with Be Here Now, Mark Coyle was there every day. Mark was involved in a lot of the sounds, and when we were setting up guitar sounds, Mark would always go, I'll just go in and tweak that. And he'd always just go in and do a tiny little tweak on the amp, but it would always just be exactly what was needed. He just had such a knack for that. He would always just go and tweak it, and it would always be like, damn, yeah, he knows what, he always knows what it needs.
In the Q interview, Noel said this, I sang this one. Of course, me and Liam had a row about it. The first line, an extraordinary guy can never have an ordinary day, comes from him asking me, how come you never get into any of the situations I get into? And I also borrowed something from Tony Blair's speech at the Labour Party conference last autumn. There are but 1,000 days preparing for 1,000 years. The jazzy bit at the end is played on a mellotron which was made for the Beatles' Abbey Road sessions. All I did was run my elbows across the keys and this mad jazz came out and everybody laughed. The phrase magic pie came from when I was pissed and looking in a rhyming dictionary for a word with an I ending. I saw magpie, but I read it as magic pie. I thought, that conjures up a few things. And Noel also added that the decision had to be made between putting the song Stay Young or Magic Pie on Be Here Now, and in the end the reason they went with Magic Pie was because it was one that he sung. He wanted to have one song on the album sung by him, and so Stay Young became a B-side. So Magic Pie, for me, that's one that was the closest the band ever got to the Sgt. Pepper's Beatles sound.
Yeah, it is an underrated track because it is a fantastic track. Whether it's too over the top for some people and too layered and kind of just too much or whatever, I think it adds to it. I think you can't just make the same record over and over. And those first three are completely different to each other. Was that an actual intentional, we're going to make this really Beatley, we're going to make this really psychedelic?
Yeah. It was the same studio as the Sgt. Pepper's.
It was, yeah, it was, yeah. Well, because originally we were going to do the whole album in Abbey Road, so it was all going to have a bit more of that flavour, it was the natural step. They'd gone to Rockfield because they did the first album on a Valley, saw the Stone Roses in Rockfield, came and looked at Rockfield and thought, right, this is where we want to do the next one. We want to be where the Stone Roses are, and go to Rockfield with all their history, plus Owen was using Rockfield all the time for all of his records by that point anyway. And then I think the natural step after that is where else can you go after you've been to Rockfield, and that was to Abbey Road and to Studio 2, to the Beatles one.
Because I know they actually apparently they sat in there with all the lights off and listened to every Beatles album back to back. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we put them all off. I mean, Liam would often say, "Oh, just stick, Sergeant Pepper on." And we'd have it coming out of the towers in the live room, and we'd walk down into the live room, so you're hearing it echoing around that massive live room with all the lights down and just a few beers, and just trying to relive what it must have been like to sit there and listen to those tracks back in the day, if you were the Beatles. Yeah, I had a walk around with Sir George Martin, and we played the tracks as we walked around. And we got Sergeant Pepper playing at the speakers as George Martin is telling you what they were doing on each part. And obviously, for people who from Abbey Road, that kind of stuff happens all the time. But when it's music you've grown up with, and then you're in there with a band like Oasis, and then all of a sudden George Martin's telling you how he was making those records, it was just like such an amazing experience.
I can't imagine how moving that must have been to be with George Martin in Abbey Road listening to the Beatles.
I mean, it was crazy, but it was made even more crazy by the fact that I was with Jim Carrey at the time.
What?
I know, it was mental. He'd come in the afternoon and introduced himself. And I was just working in there, and I think I was putting some monitor mixes down. It was a day off. So George came round and he knocked on the door, introduced himself and said, "Is it all right if I bring someone to have a look around later on that I'm working with?" And I said, "Yeah, it's only me here today." Of course it is. It happened to be Jim Carrey who was showing around. So then he shows Jim around, and I'm walking around with them. And it's just me and Jim. It's essentially George Martin explaining to me and Jim Carrey how he did everything while the Beatles are playing in Abbey Road. I've got Jim Carrey elbowing me, going, "Can you believe this is happening?" And I'm looking at Jim Carrey going, "No, I really can't believe this is happening."
In the Q interview, Noel says this: "Stand By Me starts, made a meal and threw it up on Sunday. When I first moved to London, my mum kept ringing up and asking if I was eating properly. So I tried to cook a Sunday roast and I puked up for 2 days with food poisoning. It was back to pot noodles after that. It's a bit like Live Forever, I suppose, with a touch of All the Young Dudes in the background. Though I did make sure I changed the chords." Now, Stand By Me obviously was their second big single.
I just loved it from the moment I first heard it. Yeah, it's one of my favourite tracks of theirs, I think.
There's a lot of people who have said that they actually preferred the Live by the Pool at Boneheads version. I don't. I mean, what's your preference on that?
Yeah, I like the album version. Yeah, but I mean, it's also a great version by the Pool. It's a great version as well, isn't it? It's always good to have extra content, but the album version is just got the edge for me. For me, one of the best vocals that Liam's done, really.
By 2000, his voice had started to change a little bit. It got a little bit more raspy, a little bit more crackly. Could you kind of hear that happening in the studio when he did that? Or was that not really evident?
No, not back then. I mean, there was days when his voice wasn't 100%. Yeah, but I remember him being told it was like the way he sang that he was going to have problems in later life if he just continued to sing that way. So I think that's when he kind of adopted the warm-up routines, and I imagine he's doing that all the time now.
Yeah. Despite I Hope I Think I Know being one of the songs that has aged the best from the Be Here Now album, Noel did feel kind of lukewarm about it at the time. He actually preferred the Mustique demo. In the Q interview, Noel said, "The only reason this song is on the album is for balance, because it's quite fast. I like the demo, but it's just too pop for me now. I'm slowing down. I'm getting into my Voodoo Tao stage. It reminds me of the Buzzcocks, but I think it's going to be like Hey Now on Morning Glory, the song that nobody mentions." It's interesting you said that that's your favourite vocal performance, because mine is actually the next one. I Hope I Think I Know. On this album, I think the vocals on that are outstanding. I've had other people on my channel as well say they actually prefer the vocals on I Hope I Think I Know to Slide Away. When he was singing that, was he still like drinking and smoking a lot in the studio?
Not before it was his turn to do his vocals, no. But I mean, generally day to day, yeah. I mean, he just had so much stamina. You know, he was able to drink, smoke, stay up late. and then go, all right, I'm singing tomorrow, okay. And then next day, so he wouldn't have anything to drink, maybe he's off the fags a little bit and come in and blast it out. And I mean, there was times when he did sing, having had lots of drinks, late nights when we'd go back to the studio after being out in the pub all night. And he said, I want to sing, and he'd go in and sing. And sometimes that would end up, being part of the vocal. He'd be sat there one night and he'd come back with Richard Ashcroft or whoever, and I just put the mics up and they'd just be jamming until the early hours and listening to the album. Steve Craddock would come back now and again. There was Paul Weller, I think there was Johnny Depp. There was all sorts of people who could come back, and it's kind of some jam sessions. Usually it would just be Liam coming back with them and everyone else had gone home for the night. He loved playing that album through the PA as loud as he could, and he sang every word to whoever was sat at the back listening, pinned to the back wall with this massive 4K PA rig, kind of taking their heads off. It's a great story where he did it to Teenage Fan Club, and that's the first time I met those guys. He invited them in. I just remember them being pinned to this wall, having this album blasted at them from start to finish, and Liam sang every word to them like he really meant it.
In Q magazine, Noel said this: "You guessed it, Meg is the girl in the dirty shirt." We were doing a gig in Brighton on December the 29th, 94, just before Meg and me were going out, and she was at the hotel ironing a dirty shirt because she hadn't brought enough clothes with her. I know, it sounds a bit soft. The chord structure came straight from Cry Baby Cry by the Beatles, but I think it's a bit like the Small Faces with the Wurlitzer at the end.
Well, let's move on to Girl in the Dirty Shirt, which is kind of the She's Electric of B, isn't it? Yeah. Who plays the keyboard on that? There's this kind of, I don't know, is it a Rhodes or a Hammond?
And that's the Rhodes, isn't it? It's probably, I think, is it Mike Rowe playing that? Mike still plays with Noel now, I think, doesn't he? He was there at the sessions in Abbey Road, so.
Right, so was that one was mostly recorded in Abbey Road, was it?
Yeah, I mean, the basics of the track. I mean, we worked on when we went elsewhere, we'd add, Noel would come up with an idea for a track, this needs that, I could add that to that. So we would work on them in other studios as well, but that was one of the ones that predominantly got recorded while we were at Abbey Road. Yeah.
In Q magazine, Noel says this: "The first part of the song is from the Mustique demo with Johnny Depp playing slide guitar. I like it because it's the first blues song I've done, and Liam does the best singing I've ever heard from him. I pushed him to the limit on that. He's not got very good rhythm, and we made him stamp his foot all the way through it. He couldn't sing for a week after. The scream near the end was the last bit we did. Me and Meg went back to Mustique over Christmas, and I took the rough mix with me. It needed something, and it was bugging me. Meg woke up one morning, and there I was in bed with the Walkman on, screaming. She thought I'd gone into my drug psychotic phase. But I just said, sorry, I'm just filling in a bit on the record."
So, Fading Out. Now, for me, this song, when they did it in the studio, I feel like it wasn't finished. I feel like it was finished when they played it live on the Be Here Now tour. I don't know if you've heard the live version at the G-Mex in Manchester. It rocked as hard as the song Morning Glory live, but in the studio it's kind of almost got like it's got vague hints of Bon Jovi somewhere in there, hasn't it?
Maybe that's possibly one of the songs that kind of didn't reach the potential on the album. Yeah, I suppose that's the one I remember least about the process of where it ended up.
Do you remember much about recording Johnny Depp?
I can't remember where we did that. I think possibly in Air Studios. Yeah, it was quite quick. He came in. I mean, we'd met him before on the sessions anyway. But good. He was good. He's good. He was very good. It was down to me and Grigsy to do the bass lines. Bass wasn't one of Owen's favourite pastimes, recording bass. Yeah, he already had a thing about bass players. I just remember him saying to me that he said, "I'm going to buy a bass and learn how to play bass because then I don't have to record bass players anymore. I can do it all myself." But so a lot of the time, like they would make themselves scarce, and me and Grigsy would sit there and do the bass lines.
In Q magazine, Noel said, "It's a very sad song about not wanting to lose someone you're close to. The middle eight I made up on the spot in the studio. I never had that lyric until the day we recorded it. It's a song about how you feel after a row. It's quite bleak. I did all the string arrangements and I tried to keep them as simple as possible. I like the way Mark Bolan used strings on Children of the Revolution.
For Don't Go Away, now on this track, I read somewhere, I can't remember where it was, that Liam nearly broke down in tears when he was recording his vocal, the one that's ended up on the album. I don't know if that was visible or if that was just something he was feeling, but he said he was thinking about his mum when he was singing it. Do you remember that happening? Do you remember the day when that vocal was laid down?
I do remember him being quite emotional after it. I mean, he's put absolutely everything into that, hasn't he? The emotion on that vocal is really evident. Usually just did it and then was buzzing and then celebrating after he'd kind of done the vocal, you know. But yeah, I remember kind of, the emotion after that one was kind of heightened, it's like more than he usually would be. But
was that one a full 98 tracker or 90? Was it 90? No, 96.
96. Possibly. I mean, I think we pretty much got there with all of them in the end.
Because for me, that's the Wonderwall of this record. That's the one where you can hear a certain amount of openness.
It's the most open, I suppose. Yeah, but we would have definitely been on the second machine. But I don't know whether we filled them all. Yeah, because it is the most open out of the tracks. Yeah, that's not to say we didn't fill it with something. Sometimes we just filled a track with nothing, which that sounds odd, but we did vibe. We filled it with vibe.
So what? Would you just record a running mic with nothing on it?
Yeah. Sometimes.
Really?
Yeah. It's something that Ash always did. Ash always said, we have to have a vibe track, which is just start an open mic in the room, whatever. And at the time, we highly believed that it was really important to have a vibe track. It made such a difference. You know, we were all bought into the idea. So, yeah, we just went with it.
In Q magazine, Noel said this: in Mustique, Johnny Depp and Kate Moss stayed at Mick Jagger's house. We were down on the beach and there was this toy plastic piano that belonged to one of Jagger's kids. The opening has been played on that, slowed down. I was pressing that one key for about 2 hours. Anyway, I nicked it, me being from Burnage, I can't help it. Mick can have it back if he wants. Then, back home, I was talking about drum loops with Owen Morris, and he said one of the greatest was the opening to Honky Tonk Woman. We played it and it was in the same time signature as that piano, so I wrote the song from there. I like the Rolling Stones' involvement at the start and the finish of writing it.
So, Be Here Now. Now, in an interview that Noel gave, he said that opening piano sound came from like a little toy piano thing that he found in Mustique on a beach that belonged to a member of Mick Jagger's family that he then nicked and brought back to England.
Yeah.
Is that true?
As far as I know, that's true, yeah. Yeah. I can't remember it, but I just remember him bringing it back and bringing it to the studio, and that's that's what we're using.
Who's playing that?
I think it's him. I think it's him on there. I think it was on the demo originally, so I think because it was on the demo and it was kind of became an integral part of it, so it was on there, so it was like, it has to go on the record now.
And who plays the... there's a woodwind instrument on there, isn't there? Would that be just a member of the orchestra?
Yeah, possibly it got added on the orchestra. I don't remember it. I mean, if it might have got added on the All Around the World Day, possibly, but I don't recall that it did, and I don't remember someone coming in. So it could have been added on a day when I wasn't around or something. I can't remember what it is actually.
In Q magazine, Noel said, I wrote this one ages ago, before whatever. It was 12 minutes long even then. It was a matter of being able to afford to record it, but now we can get away with the 36-piece orchestra, and the longer the better as far as I'm concerned, if it's good. I like the ambition of it all that time ago. What was all that about when we didn't even have our first single out? And, talking about the reprise, he said, I was running out of guitar lines, so I decided to fade it in with backwards guitars. We also got a Penny Lane piccolo trumpet in there because a guy in the brass section stood up and said, you should have a piccolo trumpet on that, and I've got one. So we sent him home in his taxi to fetch it. They'll all be using them soon.
Well, let's talk All Around the World anyway. You mentioned that the strings were recorded on just one day. Was there just a single day for recording all the orchestral stuff?
Yes, we were in here anyway. We were in the second studio and then booked into the main room. It was a 72-piece orchestra, so we were all buzzing about that. Because Noel had gone on talked about that for so many years, about by the time we get to do All Around the World, it has to be a 72-piece orchestra. So that song was kind of kept back for album 3 for that reason, so it could be kind of this epic kind of orchestral piece with Liam running around in between everyone, kind of conducting and kind of standing behind the conductor doing this. And very, very interesting day. Obviously, we had to fill all our tracks, so we wanted the biggest orchestra we could find because we had lots of tracks to fill. But actually, that was probably the toughest to get down to 96 tracks. After the strings, we stayed in the studio and did all the kind of extra bits in the main studio at Air.
With All Around the World, I'm aware that song at 9 minutes, it fades out. Then you've got the reprise with it fades back in, and that fades out as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So how long was the backing track?
Oh, I can't remember. It must have been about 11 minutes or something. But yeah, obviously it just kind of goes mental at the end because everyone's concentration span of doing hand claps and like the backing vocals for all that time. By the end, we're all just howling and doing whatever and skipping about the room. And so, yeah, it breaks down. So yeah, we're interested to hear that master tape now with all the kind of mayhem that is actually on there. Because I think everybody who ever stepped by the studio actually had a go at doing something on the end of that track. So there's loads of different people on there.
There's been calls for years and years to do a kind of a redone version of Be Here Now. And something I would love to hear would be an unbrickwalled All Around the World with the full ending. And so with the whole song running into the reprise without the fade out. I mean, that must be like 11, 12 minutes or something.
But it would be great to get hold of the tapes and be able to do it. You know, it would be amazing just to kind of pick it apart again and go, actually, we didn't need all them, did we? We could have just done that. And just the orchestral version of that with the vocal would be amazing. Yeah,
the Eleanor Rigby version, that would be unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be nice for that track particularly, I think, to kind of have the whole thing in its entirety stripped back. Yeah.
In Q magazine, Noel said, "I actually wrote this jamming on stage with the band during the last American tour. A really happy tune, even though there was a lot of shit going down. Because we got connected with the Beatles all the time, I thought I'd write a Rolling Stones song instead. You can almost see Keith and Ronnie with fags in their mouths, giving it some."
So last of all was It's Getting Better Man. I always felt that with this one, the version they did at Air Studios, the live version, I always thought that was so great. You listen to the Air Studios live version and go, that's how I wanted to hear the song.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones we did, so I think it was definitely kind of just getting the momentum going on the album, really. It's hard to say that, isn't it? Because it has a place on the album. It still sounds great on the album.
There's that wow, 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 wow lead guitar that I always think, I don't like that.
I think that guitar part is something that's pointed out. There's a few people who don't necessarily like that part, but still a great song, great chorus, great vocal.
I know Brian Cannon made it onto several records. Did you make it onto any of the Oasis records?
I think I'm doing the odd hand claps and the odd kind of backing vocals. Yeah, I did have a little spot playing something on 2 songs. But
do you remember what the songs were?
I'm not telling you.
Oh right, it's a secret. Oh, I see. Mate, I can't wait to read your book. I know it's in the works. Yeah,
it's in the works. It's nearly finished. From Britpop to Flip Flop is what it's called. And I'm known for wearing flip flops in all my sessions now. So it's a lot of inside information from the sessions of everybody I've had the pleasure of working with over what's nearly 30 years now. And the more you sit down and tell some of these stories, and even just that Jim Carrey one, you just think this is mental. There's some mental things that have gone on. The plan is for it to come out next year. Because of the Oasis documentary, like the interest just for the Oasis stories or the Stone Roses stories but there's so much more than that, because there's the Darkness, there's Bruce Springsteen, there's the Arctic Monkeys, there's Robbie Williams, and lots of amazing, funny stories happen with bands that aren't mega famous and aren't really well known, but some of these things you just wouldn't believe it unless you were there. Kind of kept a few things, personal things, photographs, notebooks, notepads. I've got all the session notes from What's the Story and Be Here Now.
Will they be in the book?
Some of them will be made available in a store near you next year.
Nice. Probably Noel doesn't know what you know. You are probably the only person right now on the planet who could say exactly what tracks were recorded for every song on Be Here Now without any question.
Pretty much. I mean, there's notes on every song, what guitars were used, what amps were used, the settings on the amps, what mics were on the amps, what we ordered for dinner, some of the comments on some of the takes. There's all these sessions I've been involved in, and I always keep my notes, put them in the folders, and they go in the collection. So,
mate, thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you. It's been a little bit of a tick on the bucket list for me today. So,
okay.
hey, thanks for your time. It's been great.
You're welcome.